I never thought a simple pop could completely change the course of 180 lives, including my own. My name is Captain Robert Bob Thompson, and I've been a commercial pilot for 25 years. I've flown over 18,000 hours, weathered storms that would make a meteorologist cry, landed on runways that looked more like dirt roads, and always maintained a clean record. I always believed that experience and preparation were enough for any emergency. Until that March 15th, 2023. It was a normal Tuesday morning, one of those that starts without warning it's going to be special. American Airlines Flight 1428, Dallas to Miami, departure at 2:30 p.m. A route I'd flown hundreds of times, almost on autopilot. Boeing 737-800, tail number N428AA, 180 passengers on board plus crew. Nothing different from the usual. What I didn't know was that this would be the day when all the years of training, all the simulators, all the hours studying emergency procedures would be tested in real life. And I'm not talking about a simple test. I'm talking about the kind of test that defines whether you're really a pilot or just someone who knows how to operate an aircraft under normal conditions. The pre-flight checklist had been flawless. My first officer, Michael Mike Anderson, a sharp 28-year-old who'd graduated 3 years ago but was extremely competent. We'd flown together a few times before, and I knew I could trust him. Our lead flight attendant, Sarah, was a veteran with 15 years at the company. The crew was complete and prepared. Dallas ground, American 1428, ready for pushback, gate Alpha 5, I communicated to the tower. American 1428, Dallas ground pushback approved. Contact ground 121.9 after pushback. It was routine. Everything perfectly normal. Passengers were chatting, some already sleeping, others checking their phones in the final moments before takeoff. Kids were looking out the windows with that gleam in their eyes that only first-time flyers can have. During taxi, we executed the standard checklist. Electrical systems, hydraulics, fuel, flight computers, all normal. The Boeing 737-800 is an extremely reliable aircraft. At that moment, I didn't have a shadow of doubt that we'd arrive in Miami without any hiccups. Dallas Tower, American 1428, ready for takeoff. American 1428, Dallas Tower. Runway 18 right, wind 180 at 8 knots. Cleared for takeoff. Cleared for takeoff, runway 18 right, American 1428. I pushed the throttles to takeoff position. The sound of both CFM56 engines spooling up always gave me a feeling of controlled power. 40,000 pounds of thrust per engine, taking us from standstill to 150 knots takeoff speed in less than 40 seconds. V1, rotate, Mike announced when we reached decision speed. I pulled back on the yoke smoothly, and the 737 left the ground as it always did, with the elegance of a 79-ton bird. Gear up, flaps retracted, climb power set, everything absolutely normal. We were climbing to our initial flight level, 250 knots, heading to 8,000 feet. Dallas departure, American 1428, passing 3,000, climbing 8,000. American 1428, radar contact, climb and maintain flight level 330, direct to Mizar intersection. It was exactly 2:37 p.m. when our lives changed forever. We were passing through 7,800 feet when I heard something every pilot prays they'll never hear. A loud pop, followed by a vibration that went through the entire fuselage. It wasn't a normal noise. It was the kind of sound that makes your stomach drop and triggers every survival instinct you have. Holy cow, immediately the panel lit up like a Christmas tree gone haywire. Red lights flashing, deafening warning bells, and the clear sensation that something was seriously wrong with the right engine. Engine fire. Engine 2. Engine fire. Engine 2. The warning system voice kept repeating. I looked out the right window and saw something that made my blood run cold. Orange flames shooting from the back of the right engine and pieces of metal flying through the air. This wasn't a simple failure. This was a catastrophic explosion. Jesus, Mike, get the QRH now. Engine fire, engine 2, I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady, but already feeling the adrenaline taking over. The QRH, Quick Reference Handbook, is our emergency procedures manual. Every critical situation has a specific procedure, tested thousands of times in simulators, But it's one thing to execute in the simulator, knowing it's just training. It's something completely different to do this with 180 people depending on you at 8,000 feet, with engine pieces flying everywhere. "Engine fire checklist," Mike responded, already with the manual open. His voice was a bit shaky, but he maintained professionalism. "Engine fire or severe damage, thrust lever idle." I pulled the engine 2 thrust lever to idle immediately. The fire continued. Fuel control switch cut off. I cut fuel to engine 2. It was like amputating part of our flight capability, but it was necessary. "Engine fire switch, pull and rotate left." I pulled the red emergency switch for engine 2 and rotated it left, activating the first fire suppression system. We waited 10 seconds. The fire continued. "Fire still present, second discharge," I reported, rotating the switch right to activate the second extinguishing agent. Those were the longest 10 seconds of my life. Finally, the flames diminished and ceased, but our problems were just beginning. With engine 2 completely shut down and the fire controlled, I needed to quickly assess our situation. We were flying on only one engine in an aircraft designed for 2. Is it possible? Yes. Is it easy? Definitely not. The Boeing 737 can fly on one engine only, but there are critical limitations. Our climb capability was severely compromised. Instead of 2,000 feet per minute, we could now maybe manage 300-400 feet per minute, and that's under ideal conditions, which clearly wasn't our case. Worse yet, when I looked at the instruments, I saw we hadn't just lost the engine. The explosion had damaged electrical and hydraulic systems. Our hydraulic system B was completely inoperative, and the secondary electrical system had intermittent problems. "Mike, let's assess our situation," I said, trying to stay calm while my mind raced. "Engine 2 shut down, hydraulic system B inoperative, secondary electrical problems. Fuel? Fuel normal, approximately 11 tons remaining. Flight controls. Primary operational but with degradation warning on fly-by-wire system. Landing gear? Normal indication, but no guarantee of automatic extension due to hydraulic system." The reality was clear. We had a severely damaged aircraft with limited capabilities and 180 people depending on our next decisions. There was no margin for error. My first instinct was to continue to Miami. It was our original destination, and I knew that airport well. But I quickly realized that would be a potentially fatal mistake. With only one engine and compromised systems, our climb rate was minimal. To reach Miami, we'd need to fly over mountains and rough terrain. If we lost the remaining engine or other complications arose, we wouldn't have alternate landing options. Dallas-Fort Worth International, on the other hand, was only 15 minutes away. Long runways, emergency services available, and I knew every inch of that airport. It was the logical choice, but it also meant admitting we couldn't complete our original mission. "Dallas departure. American 1428, we have an emergency. Requesting immediate return to Dallas, engine 2 inoperative after explosion." American 1428, copy. Declare souls on board and fuel remaining. 186 souls on board, fuel remaining 4 hours. Whenever we hear souls on board, our stomachs tighten. It's the question they ask when they need to know how many people are aboard in case something goes wrong. It's not for statistics. It's so emergency services know how many lives are at stake. American 1428, cleared direct Dallas. Descend and maintain 4,000 feet. Vectors for approach runway 18 right. Emergency services standing by. While Mike coordinated with air traffic control and executed checklists, I knew I needed to speak with the passengers. This is one of the hardest parts of any emergency. How do you tell 180 people their lives are in danger without causing panic? I pressed the cabin communication button. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Robert Thompson. Due to a technical issue with one of our engines, we've decided to return to Dallas as a precautionary measure. The flight is completely under control, and we'll be landing at Dallas-Fort Worth International in approximately 15 minutes. Please remain in your seats with seatbelts fastened. Our crew is prepared for any situation." It was a partial truth. The flight was under control, but it was far from just a precautionary measure. I knew Sarah and her team would understand the message and begin preparing the cabin for a possible emergency evacuation. 2 minutes later, Sarah called me on the interphone. "Captain, passengers are relatively calm. Some saw the fire in the engine and are concerned. What should I tell them?" "Tell them we had a mechanical failure that was controlled, and we're returning for safety. Prepare the cabin for emergency landing, but discreetly. If anyone asks about the fire, confirm there was a problem that was resolved." "Roger, Captain." Our descent to Dallas-Fort Worth was tense. With only one engine, every movement had to be calculated. We couldn't make sharp course corrections, and our descent rate needed to be carefully controlled to avoid losing lift. American 1428, wind 180 at 12 knots, runway 18 right available, length 12,000 feet. Confirm you can accept visual approach. Affirmative, visual approach runway 18 right, American 1428. The visual approach would be easier for me, as I could adjust our trajectory visually without relying so much on instruments that were having intermittent problems. But then came the question I was dreading. American 1428, confirm your landing weight and brake capability. Our aircraft was heavy. We had fuel for 4 hours of flight, which meant about 11 tons more than ideal landing weight. With only one engine and compromised hydraulic systems, our braking capability was reduced. Dallas, American 1428, landing weight approximately 75 tons. Brake capability degraded due hydraulic system B inoperative. American 1428, recommend runway 17 left, length 13,000 feet, emergency services positioned. The longer runway. They knew we'd need every available foot. At 2,000 feet, I began configuring the aircraft for landing. Flaps 15, then 30, then 40. Each configuration change altered our flight characteristics, and I needed to constantly compensate with rudder to keep the aircraft aligned. "Gear down," I commanded. Mike lowered the landing gear selector, but we didn't get the normal confirmation of 3 greens on the panel. "Gear down, but no visual confirmation of right main gear." Damn it! My heart raced again. On top of all our problems, now we had doubts about the landing gear. If the right main gear wasn't locked, the landing could turn into a catastrophe. Dallas Tower, American 1428, possible problem with right main landing gear. Request visual inspection. American 1428, maintain altitude 1,500 feet, will conduct visual inspection. For 2 agonizing minutes, we flew straight and level while the tower observed us with binoculars. American 1428, visual confirmation. All landing gear appears down and locked. Momentary relief. At least the landing gear was working. At 500 feet altitude, I could see the runway clearly. Fire trucks and ambulances lined both sides, people watching from nearby buildings. The entire airport operation had stopped to watch us. American 1428, wind 180 at 15 knots, gust to 20, runway 17 left, clear to land. Clear to land, runway 17 left, American 1428. The wind had picked up, which would make the landing even more challenging with only one engine. Crosswind with an unbalanced aircraft is a recipe for trouble. Mike, speed check. 140 knots descending. Altitude check. 300 feet descending. Landing checklist complete. Complete. At 100 feet, I knew there was no turning back. It was now or never. I gradually reduced power on the remaining engine, trying to keep the aircraft aligned with the runway, while the crosswind tried to push us off centerline. 50 feet, 40, 30, 20, 10. The touchdown was firmer than I would have liked, but perfect considering the circumstances. I felt the aircraft settle onto the runway with a solid thud. Immediately I applied the brakes, or what was left of them. "Maximum reverse on engine 1, I shouted. Mike activated the reverse thrust system on the operational engine while I pressed the brakes with all my strength. The aircraft was decelerating, but slowly, very slowly. "Speed check. 100 knots, 90 at 80. The runway stretched ahead of us, but I could see it was running out fast. At 70 knots still, we passed the runway's midpoint. 60 knots, 50, 40. Finally, at 30 knots, I had full control of the aircraft. We exited the runway at the final taxiway, having used almost 12,000 feet of the available 13,000. American 1428, welcome back to Dallas. Taxi to gate Alpha 7, follow me vehicle. After parking at the gate, I shut down the engines and turned to Mike. We were both sweating, trembling slightly from adrenaline, but alive. And most importantly, all 186 occupants of the aircraft were safe. "Well done, Captain," Mike said, his voice still a bit shaky. "We did it, Mike. All of us did it." The evacuation was calm. Passengers exited normally through the jet bridge. No need to use emergency slides. Many stopped to thank me. Some were crying. Others wanted to know exactly what had happened. An elderly lady, who must have been about 70, held my hand and said, "Thank you for bringing me back to my family." At that moment, I realized the real weight of what had happened. It wasn't just 180 passengers. It was 180 lives, 180 families, 180 stories that would continue because we made the right decisions at the right times. In the following days, an investigation team from the NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, thoroughly examined our aircraft. What they discovered was alarming. The right engine had suffered catastrophic failure, caused by metal fatigue in one of the high-pressure turbine blades. The blade broke, creating an imbalance that destroyed the entire engine in seconds. Metal pieces punctured the fuselage in 2 places, damaging hydraulic and electrical systems. "You guys were very lucky," said the lead investigator. "If that blade had broken 5 seconds later, during initial rotation, or 5 seconds earlier, during takeoff acceleration, the outcome could have been very different." Luck. That word echoed in my head for weeks. How much of what happened was luck, and how much was preparation? Flying commercially means carrying a responsibility that few professions know. Every time you start the engines, you're assuming responsibility for hundreds of lives. Entire families trust you to get them safely from point A to point B. During my 25 years of career, I always knew that one day I might face a real emergency. We train for this constantly, simulators, checklists, procedures, but nothing really prepares you for the moment when it's real. When the red lights are flashing, alarms are sounding, and you know your next decisions could mean life or death for almost 200 people. What saved me, what saved us, was training. Years and years of repeating the same procedures until they became automatic. When adrenaline takes over and your brain goes into survival mode, it's training that takes control, but it was also teamwork. Mike, despite being young and less experienced, executed every procedure perfectly. Sarah kept the cabin calm and organized. Air traffic control gave us absolute priority and guided us home. The firefighters were ready for any eventuality. This experience taught me some lessons I carry to this day. First, never underestimate the importance of basic training. Those procedures you repeat hundreds of times in the simulator that sometimes seem unnecessary or excessive are exactly what will save your life when everything goes wrong. Second, clear and honest communication is fundamental. When I informed passengers about the situation, I could have downplayed it even more or even omitted information. But honesty, even if it causes anxiety, is always the best policy. Third, every experience counts. Those 18,000 flight hours, all the different situations I faced, all the airports where I landed, all of that contributed to my ability to make quick and correct decisions under pressure. Fourth, humility is essential. No matter how experienced you are, aviation can always surprise you. There's always something new to learn, always situations you've never faced before. Many people ask me if I was afraid to fly after that day. The answer is complicated. Of course, I became more aware of the risks. Of course, every time I hear a different noise in the engine, my heart speeds up a little. But I also became a better pilot, more attentive, more prepared, more humble before the complexity of a modern aircraft. That experience reminded me why I love this profession, because every flight is a responsibility, every landing is an achievement, and every passenger who exits the plane safely is a victory. I returned to flying 3 weeks later, after passing psychological evaluation and medical recertification. The first flight was tense. I sweated more than I'd like to admit during takeoff. But when we reached our destination without problems, I felt a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. Our experience led to some changes in the company's emergency procedures. Simulator training was intensified, especially for multiple failure situations. New passenger communication protocols were developed. But perhaps the most important impact was on mindset. Our story became a case study used in pilot training, a demonstration that following procedures, staying calm, and working as a team can overcome the most serious emergencies. If you're starting in aviation or dream of becoming a pilot, let me share something important. This profession will test you in ways you can't imagine. There will be moments when you question your abilities, moments when fear tries to take over. But there will also be moments of pure magic. The first solo, the first night landing, the first time you break through a cloud layer and emerge into perfect blue sky. And if you're lucky, or unlucky depending on your point of view, there will be moments that define your career and your life. Always train, always study, always respect the aircraft and weather, and never ever stop learning. Aviation doesn't forgive arrogance, but it rewards humility and preparation. 6 months after the incident, I was at a company Christmas party when a young man approached me. "Captain Thompson, I'm Jake. I was on flight 1428, seat 23F. Jake was 19 at the time of the flight. He was going to Miami to visit his girlfriend at university. He told me that during our emergency, he decided he wanted to be a pilot. Seeing how you guys stayed calm, how you solved the problem, how you brought us home, I knew that's what I wanted to do with my life." Jake was studying to become a commercial pilot. He dreamed of flying for an airline. Our conversation lasted hours. I talked about the profession, about the challenges, about the responsibility, but also about the reward of being part of the most important stories in people's lives. Today, 5 years later, Jake is a first officer at a regional airline. I occasionally receive messages from him telling me about his flights, his challenges, his achievements. It's gratifying to know that our experience inspired someone to follow this incredible profession. The Boeing 737-800, tail number N428AA, was repaired and returned to service 3 months later. The engine was completely replaced, all damaged systems were repaired or replaced, and the aircraft underwent thorough inspections before being cleared for flight. I flew that same aircraft again about a year later. It was a coincidence, not planned. When I saw the tail number on the flight planning, I felt a knot in my chest, but also a feeling of pride. That aircraft had brought us home when everything went wrong. It had withstood a catastrophic explosion and still kept us in the air long enough for a safe landing. Flying it again was like reuniting with an old friend who went through a traumatic experience with you. Many people ask me about accident statistics in aviation. It's true that flying is statistically much safer than driving a car. The probability of being in a fatal aircraft accident is approximately 1 in 11 million. But statistics are cold. When you're facing a real emergency, when red lights are flashing and alarms are sounding, statistics don't matter. What matters is training, experience, equipment, and yes, a bit of luck. Our industry is obsessively focused on safety. Every incident is thoroughly investigated. Every failure leads to improvements in equipment or procedures. Every lesson learned is shared globally. That's why flying is so safe. Not because accidents don't happen. It's because when they do happen, we learn from them and become better. Being a commercial pilot means carrying a weight that few people understand. Every time you sign the flight plan, you're assuming legal and moral responsibility for the safety of everyone on board. It's not just a job, it's a mission. When I see passengers boarding, especially families with small children, I always think, they're trusting me with their most precious lives. It's an enormous weight, but also an immense privilege. This responsibility made me a better person, more careful, more attentive to details, more aware of the consequences of every decision. In aviation, there's no close enough. Either you do it right, or the consequences can be catastrophic. Modern aircraft are technological marvels. Automated systems, computers that can fly the plane better than any human, sensors that detect problems before they become critical. But technology is just a tool. On the day of our emergency, it was the human factor that made the difference. It was experience to quickly recognize the severity of the situation. It was training to execute procedures under extreme pressure. It was judgment to make quick decisions with limited information. Technology helped us. The warning systems informed us about the fire. The computers helped us maintain control of the aircraft. But it was human decisions that saved us. That's why I always tell young pilots, learn the technology, but never depend solely on it. Develop your manual flying skills, practice procedures until they become instinctive. Because when everything goes wrong, it will be your experience and training that make the difference. Being a pilot also deeply affects your family. My wife, Susan, always knew the risks of my profession, but that day was different. When she heard about the emergency on the news before I could even call home, she lived every pilot's wife's worst nightmare. I saw on TV that an American Airlines plane had an engine explosion, she told me later. My heart stopped. I spent 10 minutes trying to find out if it was you. Our kids, 15 and 12 at the time, were also affected. Suddenly, Dad's job wasn't just cool, it was dangerous. I had to have several conversations explaining that accidents are rare, that we constantly train for emergencies, that aviation is safe. But I also used the experience to teach them about responsibility, about how preparation can make a difference in critical moments, about staying calm under pressure. These are lessons that go beyond aviation. That experience changed my perspective on many things. Day-to-day problems that used to stress me out seemed insignificant. Arguments about money, traffic, politics, all of that lost importance in the face of the reality that life can change in seconds. I began to value every moment with family more. Every dinner at home, every conversation with the kids, every hug from my wife gained special meaning. When you face the real possibility of not coming home, you realize what truly matters. I also became more present on every flight. Before, it was easy to go into mental autopilot on routine flights. Now every takeoff receives my total attention. Every checklist is executed with maximum care. Every passenger who boards is a sacred responsibility. After 25 years flying commercially, and especially after our emergency, I have some advice for passengers. First, pay attention to safety instructions. I know you've heard them 1,000 times, but in a real emergency, knowing where the exits are can save your life. Second, trust the crew. We train intensively for emergencies. If we ask you to stay calm and follow instructions, it's because we know what we're doing. Third, flying is safe. Very safe. The probability of being in an accident is minuscule, but accidents happen, and when they do, your chance of survival is very high if you stay calm and follow procedures. Fourth, if something seems wrong, don't hesitate to call the crew. It's better to report something that turns out to be normal than to ignore something important. Despite the risks, challenges, and weight of responsibility, I wouldn't trade my profession for any other. Being a pilot is more than a career. It's a vocation. Every time I take off, I'm taking people to family reunions, important business trips, honeymoons, final visits to sick relatives. I'm part of the most important stories in people's lives. When a child looks out the window during takeoff with that gleam in their eyes, when an executive manages to arrive on time for a crucial meeting, when a family reunites after years apart, I was part of making that happen. Our emergency reminded me why I chose this profession. It's not just about flying incredible aircraft or seeing the world from a unique perspective. It's about the sacred responsibility of getting people safely from one place to another. It's about being prepared for the moment when your skills and training can make the difference between life and death. One of the things I'm most proud of from that day was how our team functioned. Mike, despite being young and less experienced, executed every procedure perfectly. He didn't hesitate, didn't panic, maintained professionalism even under extreme pressure. Sarah and her flight attendant team kept the cabin calm and organized. They discreetly prepared for a possible emergency evacuation without alarming passengers. They were ready to act if necessary, but kept the situation under control. Air traffic control gave us absolute priority, cleared our path, provided the most suitable runway, coordinated with emergency services. They were our eyes and ears on the ground. The firefighters and paramedics were positioned and ready before we even landed. If something had gone wrong during landing, they would have been there in seconds. That's modern aviation. It's not a lone hero saving the day. It's a team of trained professionals, each doing their part perfectly, working together for a common goal, bringing everyone home safely. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about what could have happened if things had gone wrong. If the engine had exploded during takeoff, if we had lost the remaining engine, if the landing gear hadn't worked, if the fire hadn't been controlled. But then I remember the 180 people who went home safely that day. I remember the lady who held my hand and thanked me for bringing her back to her family. I remember the encounters with passengers months later who thanked me personally. I remember that I did exactly what I had trained my whole life to do, that when the critical moment came, I was prepared. That all those hours of study, all those simulators, all those seemingly boring procedures made the difference when it really mattered. That's the true reward of being a pilot. It's not the salary, it's not the travel, it's not the prestige. It's knowing that when people needed you most, you were there, prepared, competent, reliable. It's knowing that 180 stories continued because you did your job right. 2 years after the emergency, I was at a company barbecue when a young man approached me. "Captain Thompson, I'm Jake. I was on flight 1428, seat 23F. Jake was 19 at the time of the flight. He was going to Miami to visit his girlfriend at university. He told me that during our emergency, he decided he wanted to be a pilot. Seeing how you guys stayed calm, how you solved the problem, how you brought us home, I knew that's what I wanted to do with my life." Jake was studying commercial aviation. He dreamed of flying for an airline. Our conversation lasted hours. I talked about the profession, about the challenges, about the responsibility, but also about the reward of being part of the most important stories in people's lives. Today, 5 years later, Jake is a first officer at a regional airline. I occasionally receive messages from him telling me about his flights, his challenges, his achievements. It's gratifying to know that our experience inspired someone to follow this incredible profession. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. I know it was long, but I needed to tell every detail because each one of them mattered that day. Aviation teaches lessons that go far beyond flying aircraft. It teaches about preparation, about teamwork, about making decisions under pressure, about carrying enormous responsibilities with dignity. But perhaps the most important lesson is this. When you have a sacred responsibility, whether it's piloting an airplane with 180 people, caring for a family, or leading a team, you need to be prepared for the moment when everything goes wrong. Because it's not when things are going well that you're tested, it's when everything falls apart, when red lights are flashing, when everyone is looking at you expecting a solution, that you'll discover if you were really prepared. That day, I was. Not because I'm special, but because I spent 25 years preparing for that moment, and when it came, I did what I had to do. I hope you never have to face a situation like that. But if you do, I hope you're prepared. Because when 180 lives depend on you, there's no margin for error. There's no second chance, there are no excuses. There's just you, your training, your experience, and the sacred responsibility to bring everyone home. Sometimes people ask me if I consider myself a hero. The answer is no. Heroes do extraordinary things by choice. I just did my job. But maybe that's what makes aviation so special. It's a profession where just doing your job can mean saving hundreds of lives, where routine preparation can become heroism when necessary. If you're thinking about becoming a pilot, know that it's not a profession for everyone. It demands total dedication, constant study, extreme responsibility. But it also offers rewards that few professions can give. The reward of knowing you make a difference in people's lives every day. The reward of mastering one of the most complex machines ever created by humanity. The reward of seeing the world from a perspective that few humans have ever experienced. And, if you're lucky or unlucky, the reward of knowing that when the most important moment of your career arrived, you were prepared. You made a difference. You brought everyone home. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this tale from the skies, subscribe to Black Box to not miss the next episode. Share it with someone who's also interested in aviation, and leave in the comments, what pilot story would you like to hear next? Until the next flight. This was the true story of Captain Robert Thompson and American Airlines Flight 1428. All technical procedures described are based on real commercial aviation protocols. No real passenger names were used, respecting the privacy of those involved.